Hello, my name is Markos Moulitsas. Welcome to Daily Coast's The Brief. This is our weekly show about politics, and it co-hosts me and Kerry Eleveld. There she is. She is a senior political writer at Daily Coast. Today we have with us Ilyse Hogue. She is the president of NARAL Pro-Choice America. We'll be pulling in clips from an interview we previously recorded with her earlier this week. But before that, we're going to start talking about everything, right, Kerry? Like 50 years of politics condensed into this sort of vortex black hole of the first few days of October.
What is even happening? I mean, honestly, Donald Trump managing to get the coronavirus, which was like only a matter of when, not if, right? Because he was
what took so
long because it was so reckless. And now he's like managed to like bring the entire US government down, with the exception of, Republicans refuse to sort of come clean. Mitch McConnell won't say whether or not he's been tested and where's the, what the testing says. And, suddenly Attorney General Barr is quarantining out of the blue, but hasn't said anything about a positive diagnosis. But in the meantime, we've got at least three senators who have tested positive. We have another handful of them, it seems, quarantining at this point. We've got the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, along with other people in the, top command structure of the military, that are quarantining because, one of Trump's personal aides, who's active duty military, tested positive. It seems there's potentially a link there. And then on top of that, you've got the White House, which is like a ghost town. All of Trump's top aides, Kellyanne Conway and, Bill Stepien, the campaign manager, and, Rudy Giuliani's taking tests. But you have all these positives. I mean, this is just bizarre. And Trump has almost single-handedly managed to like bring down the US government.
That typhoid Trump, right? It's funny. All that has happened, and we basically forgot about his taxes. That was a week ago.
You mean that story from yesteryear?
Right. We found out that Melania Trump not only basically said, fuck the kids, fuck those children, but even worse for American politics, fuck Christmas. Right. That story sort of kind of got lost in the hubbub.
Melania and Trump's war on Christmas.
Right. And so I think there's even more stuff that I can't remember, because how can we?
How can we? Except that this does, there was this brief moment of hope for Republican operatives where they're like, oh, maybe there'll be some goodwill towards Trump because he's tested positive, and
he'll show empathy.
Right, he'll become a sympathetic character, and he'll come out of this a little humbled, saying, humbled, because that's Trump.
Humbled.
Trumpled. So, but he'll come out of this and he'll say something reasonable, like, oh, this is just a reminder that COVID's still with us. We need to be careful and wear masks and protect each other from this disease. It was really tough, and I'm glad to be where I am with it. But no, none of that. So he took a moment where he could have really, out of this, his personal interaction and battle with this disease, he could have used that to try and turn the corner on this, but instead he just came out and threw all of that away. And let me tell you something, the suburban women, and particularly the white suburban women, right? Because the black suburban women and don't vote for Trump. African American women.
They've been good for always.
They don't. African American women up and down the board don't vote for Trump ever. So I'm not leaving them out. I'm just saying they're not voting for Trump. But these white suburban women who Trump really needs to woo back to the fold, they are not real excited. I can just guarantee you. And some of this is starting to bear out in the polling already. I think. I mean, you and I, we're looking at different polls here, but they are not going to be excited about this. Don't let the virus dominate you sort of, mentality. They know that they're not going to get airlifted to Walter Reed. Right. They know that they're not going to have access to some experimental drug, whether or not they would even want to take it. They know that they don't have 20 to 30 medical staff members running around their house all the time to take care of them. They know that the studies on this and how it affects kids are still sort of developing and inconclusive, and some kids develop severe problems, and we're not sure about the long-term impact. So if anyone thought that he was going to come out of this with a hint of sobriety that might sort of give him a chance with these, pretty highly informed voters, that's not happening. That's not happening.
So I was just sort of thinking big picture, even stepping back from the immediate moments of this insane week and a half that we're still living through, right? This is not over by any stretch of the imagination. And you go back to the beginning of the year, and it seems to me that the Republican goals were pretty clear at the time, and I think they were pretty confident, right? They needed to win re-election. They wanted Trump to win re-election. They needed to hold the Senate, and it's a map that should actually favor the Republicans. Most, if just one of the battlegrounds right now is a blue state. And so this was a very tough map for, two of them were blue states. Very tough map for Democrats, and Republicans had a 3-seat sort of buffer, in addition to the Alabama Senate seat, which everybody sort of has assumed from day one that they were going to reclaim in 2020, right? So they had some breathing room. So I think they were pretty confident that Trump would win re-election. I don't know why, but they were very confident. They were definitely confident they would hold the Senate. And then, this opportunity arose late in this political season to cement the conservative majority on the Supreme Court. So it is currently 5-3, and they are doing everything they can, right, to rush this replacement so they can have a 6-3 conservative majority in the court. And suddenly, because of the coronavirus, I think all of that is in doubt. All of that is in doubt. So I actually think it would be really helpful to walk through these 3 Republican goals and just really sort of dig into how they have screwed this up as bad as they have. So now you're Trump, you're looking at the fractured Democratic primary. You're thinking that Bernie Sanders is going to come out, the victor, right? So they're all feeling pretty confident of themselves. And so they're writing these talking points that they never rewrote. That, these talking points basically saying that, the far left of the party and they're beholden to the AOC, the squad, and all that nonsense. And they're very confident they were going to win re-election. And Kerry, we both dig into the polls, right? I don't think I've seen anything with numbers except for COVID.
Not since Joe Biden wrapped up the nomination. And, once the general election sort of starts in earnest around, the
consolidation of the left, right? So,
the consolidation of the left, right? So and to some extent, Joe Biden has been super stable in the polls, and what has happened is that Trump has sort of frittered away the goodwill that he had, just like he's doing now, right? That he might have had on the coronavirus. He frittered away the goodwill that he got, that in terms of there being a national emergency that originally wasn't of his own making, right?
He got a bump at the very beginning.
Right, and he declared a national emergency around mid-March, right? He got that bump in the polls. It was like a handful of points or so, but
not much.
But for him,
people wanted to rally.
And he was doing those coronavirus task force briefings, which he initially got a lot of viewers. People were pretty much like sequestered at home, and
Scared.
having not much to do, looking for information, right, about when and how we were going to get the nation through this. And so everybody tuned in, and it took him all of 2 weeks to just ruin that entirely, right? To just do away with any bump that he was getting, and actually, of course, start to like lose steam in the polls based on too much Trump, because it turned out instead of Trump doing it to inform the public, it was all about himself. And one moment in particular that still sticks out in my mind is NBC's Peter Alexander saying to him, "What would you say to voters right now, or to Americans?" I don't think he said voters, but what would you say to Americans right now who are scared, who are worried about this? And Trump said something like, "I would say you're a nasty reporter, and that's a nasty question." And it's like, really? I mean, and that
wasn't the
type
gotcha
of thing. No,
that was not a gotcha
not
question.
right.
That was, in fact, that was a softball.
That was the softball question. He should have just been able to say, "Yeah, I think we're all, entering into this with a little trepidation." I mean, that was such a layup. And he just, and instead of like getting it in the hoop, he just took the ball and shoved it down Peter Alexander's throat, along with the rest of America. So, anyway, he had this. I'm getting lost in the deep. You're trying to go big picture, and I keep on zeroing in on things. But in any case, this race, once people started looking at Joe Biden and Trump, has been relatively stable. There were these sort of, what's really interesting now is you've had in the last couple of days some polls come out nationally that have shown a decent bump for Trump, right? You've had this NBC Wall Street Journal. For Biden.
Yeah, okay. Whew.
No, no, fake news. Oh God. So no, for Biden. I mean, for a second in there, we were going to have Donald Trump plugging the Daily Kos show
Finally, somebody's got the correct news.
Spreading disinformation. Anyway, no, the bump has been for Biden nationally, and there was the NBC Wall Street Journal poll that showed Biden nationally with a 14-point advantage, and there's this CNN poll that came out today. That came out over the weekend. CNN poll that came out today that showed, I think, a 16-point advantage for Biden, and we're not sure exactly where the polling is headed right now, but in the post-debate, these were both post-debate polls that came out after Trump got down in the dirt and tried to drag everyone, including the viewers, with him through this, like he had this unbelievable meltdown. He's still sort of surprising that he can be as bad as he is at this stuff. But both of these suggest that voters were just repelled by that performance. The NBC poll didn't really catch much of anything having to do with him testing positive, but the CNN poll was taken partially after he had tested positive. And so we're not sure how that's going to play out yet, but it does seem that if there's anything happening right now, it's good news for Joe Biden. And I feel like I don't want to speak for you. I'd love to hear your reaction to this, but I feel like what I'm starting to see is a complete disconnect between Donald Trump, who is living in his own world, and the American voters, right? So Donald Trump doing something like staging this, I'm leaving the Walter Reed Medical Center and I'm going to come back and go up this flight of stairs and rip off my mask and declare, "Don't let the virus dominate you." All the while, getting up the flight of stairs and sort of huffing and puffing and gasping for breath.
Suppressing a cough.
he did not look well. I mean, anyone who was watching that objectively, he did not look well. So he didn't, I don't think, he thinks he projected strength, right?
Yeah.
I don't think he projected strength. I think he projected desperation. And I think what you're seeing is a true 60% of voters watching what Trump has done, his handling of his positive test, the way it is affecting the government and the White House, and saying this guy, along with that debate I saw last Tuesday, is off his rocker. And he is so out of touch with where the rest of America is. It's just doing him in. And I feel like I'm seeing this, whatever few percentages there were left to maybe go one way or the other. This is just cementing it. This is just cementing it away from Trump and toward Biden. That's what I feel like I'm seeing. I'm not sure. We haven't had a chance to discuss this really.
Yeah.
So
Tim Alberta today in the smart political writer, wrote this piece where he's basically saying it looks like Trump is going to lose. He's way out on a limb there. But I know for a lot of these political observers, it's really difficult, particularly since everybody's so burned from 2016, right? And he writes, while it seems, I'm paraphrasing, while it seems that he's, headed for defeat, Donald Trump has escaped, he's pulled, his hair out of the fire so many times that you can't take it for granted anymore. And it's like, he did it once, not so many times,
right.
Once. And he was up against an unfortunately historically unpopular figure. Republicans spent 20, 30 years attacking Hillary Clinton and turning what is an amazing woman into a negative. And so what you had in the end is she had all the baggage of an incumbent. So we see this in the exit polls where Donald Trump won 56% of the voters who did not like either candidate. There was a lot of people who didn't like Donald Trump and they did not like Hillary Clinton. And when they weighed both of them, they decided, okay, we're going to go with the new guy because we know Hillary Clinton is all those things the Republican noise machine have said that Hillary Clinton is, right? So Donald Trump comes out, he makes a mess out of everything. And now you have a new generation of double haters, people who don't like Joe Biden and they still don't like Donald Trump. And what we're seeing in the polling time and time again is that between 80 and 90% of those double haters are opting for Joe Biden. It's not even close. There was some parity, 56, 60% Trump and the rest was Hillary, right? I mean, it was lopsided, but this is not lopsided. This is en masse. So I think if these polls are accurate, and it seems too good to be true, and so I'm a little hesitant to get overly excited. But if that is what is happening, then I think it's those double haters saying like, yeah, I don't need another 4 weeks to decide that Donald Trump is not the right person. And a lot of these people are these famous, infamous, college-educated white suburban women that we talk about and we talk about so much. And the thing is, Trump lost them. Not this year. He hasn't done it. COVID didn't lose him. He lost him in 2017, right after he took office because of his bullying and the racism and the xenophobia. And this is not something these suburban women really reflects their values. And so they were historically Republican. And then they in some of the polling actually suggested that Hillary Clinton would win them. She didn't. In the end, they reverted to history. And this year, I'm not worried about them because we saw in 2018 that they moved to the Democratic Party en masse. And this is always my favorite stat. It's the stat that really drives home just how big of a seismic shift this is. In 2018, Democrats won 41 seats in the House of Representatives. 38 of them were in suburban districts. We're talking a mass annihilation of the Republican Party. And when I said earlier that the Republicans had those three goals, right, the Supreme Court, the Senate, and the presidency, I didn't mention the House because that systematic ass whooping in those suburban, formerly Republican districts was so overwhelming and so complete and so persistent that not even Republicans were pretending that they had a chance of winning back the House this year. So everything you see this year is sort of like, is Trump doing anything to win back these college-educated white suburban women, right? And
right.
No.
No, he's not. He's not constitutionally capable of that is the problem. And, this weekend with the whole turn with the coronavirus is just another case in point why it's impossible for him to, pivot the pivot that was coming, right? So that pivot's never happening. And, anyone who was even remotely paying attention to who Donald Trump is knew that pivot wasn't going to come. But I think it's just worth mentioning too, since I talked about national polls, that all of the state level polls that have come out in the last few days too have all been super positive for Joe Biden. I mean, I think we had a New York Times Siena poll that was +7 Biden in Pennsylvania.
It was one. I think we just saw one at +12. I mean, it's
plus that was Monmouth, and we had a Florida poll from New York Times Siena that was +5 in Florida. I mean, if Florida goes for Biden, like it's basically over.
Now,
but then all this
never count on Florida though.
No, I never count on Florida. No, it's a heartbreaker.
But we got so many other targets at this point. Florida's sort of the bonus, the cherry on top.
I just feel like without getting too sort of micro on all these different polls, I just wanted to, I think it's worth mentioning because people felt really burned, right, in 2016, that there's a lot more statewide polling now too by very reputable pollsters. Yeah. And so there's good data coming at the state level that suggests that this is that Biden is really in as strong as a position as one might think. And I've gotten to the point where I've started to worry less about whether Biden has the support and the voters to win the vote. And I'm starting to worry more about whether this systematic effort by Republicans at every level to attack votes at the state level and the county level even, and suppress votes and make it very difficult for mail-in votes that for some reason aren't exactly accurate. They don't have the signature, or they weren't included in the in the privacy envelope, or whatever the case may be. I've started to worry more about that than actually whether Biden has the support and momentum and energy at this point to win. I think he, in my book, very clearly does, and is looking very, very good, even in terms of the Electoral College for having, for wrapping this up and winning. And my worry is less about whether or not the enough American voters support him, and more about, I'm just looking at this list, efforts by, we have standing lawsuits in Arizona and Michigan and North Carolina and Texas and Wisconsin, and there's the post office, et cetera. And I actually can't even keep all the details in my head about which lawsuits are doing what, but that seems more worrisome to me personally.
So both of us wrote this weekend very similar pieces as Donald Trump went to the hospital, about how it sort of undermined almost the entire premise of his campaign. We wrote that it shattered, or it punctured his aura of invincibility, right? That he's this macho man who's just, and look at Biden with his big ass mask. What a weak non-man he is, right? And
right. And also
me,
also just to like take all emphasis off of the coronavirus, right? I mean, just to, his whole shtick was, we're going to take emphasis off the coronavirus. It's behind us. Don't worry about it. Yeah. And, and Biden's weak and we're invincible. And then all of a sudden, it's coronavirus big. And also he's lifted to the hospital, not Biden. So sorry, go ahead.
Right, exactly. And the reason he can't pivot, and the reason he's never been able to pivot, is because he is more concerned about what his deplorable 30% base thinks, right? And this is the crowd that, these are the incels, the Proud Boys, the domestic terrorists, the racists, and they're all despised, right? They all want their strong man, their strong daddy. Like, these are the people that were drooling after Putin, because Putin is such a manly man, strong man, right? And this is what Trump has modeled himself after. And so you suddenly, he's in a hospital, right? And you're thinking, okay, there's nothing worse to the Donald Trump sort of aura of invincibility. I like how you put it that way, that he was the strong one, he was the vigorous one, he wasn't, and obviously we look at him, we're like, oh my God, if we're gonna have the battle of senility,
right,
the battle. But this has been his approach, and this punctured it. And so from Friday on, I was writing that this is not just a threat it's not a threat to Trump. He's going to lose, and he can't pivot and show empathy and caring and humility, because it would utterly undermine the entire premise that makes him popular with that 30% deplorable base. So he can't even. He doesn't want to go after those suburban women because he doesn't want to do the things that would cost him support with his core base. And you knew everything he did, including leaving the hospital early, and that Covida moment, as somebody on TV called it, the Covida moment.
I think that was Jim Acosta, CNN, to give him credit. I think that's who it was, but
yeah, you're right. You're right. Was all of it is predicated on, look how strong I am. And if you see the right-wing reactions, like he beat COVID in 3 days, right? It's look what a strong man he is. And there's a very real chance, I would almost say there's a probability that he'll be back in the hospital within a week, or he'll collapse at a rally, or something will happen that will just utterly shatter. And this is not a danger to Trump. He's going to lose. Trump is going to lose. It's not a danger to Trump. What it's a danger to is the rest of the Republican Party, because they're hanging on by a thread in places like Kansas, in Montana, and Alaska, and South Carolina. And if those Republicans, Trump supporters, Texas, if those Trump Republicans decide that they're not going to turn out because their hero is actually weak and wheezing and hanging on for life in a hospital bed, then that is the utter collapse of the Republican Party. It's not going to be people changing their minds. There may be, there will be some movement in the polling. I think those undecideds likely going to fall towards Biden in the end. But do Trump's core base turn out? And I think this is a good segue to the Senate, because it absolutely, they're already, why is South Carolina competitive? This is a state that Trump won by what, 12, 15 points last time?
I think yes. I think, well, first of all, if you look at any of the numbers right now in any of these statewide polls, Democrats are doing, even though Trump is still technically winning South Carolina, depending on which poll you look at, by 6, 7, 8 points. Some of them have them closer, right? But someone like Lindsey Graham is actually, I think, a weak incumbent. So Trump could actually win South Carolina. I know that people say there's no ticket splitters anymore, but there are ticket splitters. If you look at Sherrod Brown, there's ticket splitters in Ohio who voted
not just ticket splitters, but also fall off. People may vote for Donald Trump and say that Lindsey Graham, he was John McCain's best friend, and John McCain voted against eliminating Obamacare.
Right. And you've seen Lindsey Graham go on this talking to her on CNN, not CNN, on Fox, where every time he gets on, he begs for donations. It's
pathetic.
Of course, there's been this outpouring of donations where, the Democratic challengers are almost all in much better stead at this point than the Republican incumbents. But, you're seeing that from Lindsey Graham. It looks truly desperate. I don't know. He may hang on there. Who's to say? But the point is
South Carolina. He should hang on.
He should hang on, and he
but
might
he shouldn't
not.
be. Yeah,
but
it shouldn't be competitive.
The other thing I saw today, which was really interesting, was John Cornyn in Texas. Now, talk about the most milquetoasty guy, ever. Even in Texas, he has kind of low name recognition because he's not Ted Cruz, right? And so people are really not. He doesn't have a very high favorability rating. He doesn't have very strong name recognition, right? And John Cornyn, who was the number 2 in the Senate, the number 2 senator in the GOP caucus last Congress, right? he is, while the vast majority of Republicans are keeping their head low and either saying stupid stuff or trying to just avoid saying anything about Trump's implosion over the past week, John Cornyn was telling the Houston Chronicle editorial board in the past couple days, hey, I think that Donald Trump and his, eagerness to get past COVID kind of got out over his skis, and quote unquote got out over his skis, and then said something along the lines of, and I can't remember the exact quote, but it's pretty close. He said something along the lines of, this should be a reminder to all of us. What's happened to Trump should be a reminder to all of us that this hasn't gone away yet, and we need to be careful, and that type of thing. So that's that quote, that moderation from John Cornyn suggests to me that he's actually truly worried about winning the very suburban white women that we're talking about. He's actually worried about losing that crowd and having Trump steal it from under him, and just him being associated with the Trump. So him being willing to to say anything even remotely negative about Trump, as mild as it was, and risk potentially Trump taking aim at him, right? Because that's what they all fear. Says to me that John Cornyn does not feel like absolutely 100% safe in his Texas Senate seat against MJ Hager. So
yeah, polling shows him with a slight lead, but again, he's what I've seen is he's in the mid 40s. There is actual room for the undecideds to tip it in the Democrats' favor, and definitely has to be looking. Yeah.
They've registered 1.5 million voters since 2016 in that state, right?
Oh, good.
So it's a truly, in that sense. Yeah.
Yeah, Beto O'Rourke lost by 200,000 for context.
Right. So in that, when you think about demographic change, and that's what's happening in these Sunbelt states that are suddenly potentially, in play for Democrats, 1.5 million new voters is a total wild card, so who knows? And clearly John Cornyn's seeing something in his polling that he's needing to create a little bit of separation from Trump and try to sound reasonable when Trump's just, just throwing it all away.
So the big picture is that Democrats need to win 3 seats, net 3 seats, plus the presidency to have the tiebreaker in a 50-50 Democratic Senate. They are likely to lose the Alabama race. That was a special election victory against a literal child molester, Roy Moore. So that means that Democrats need to pick up 4. Right now, they're looking really solid in Arizona, Colorado, Maine, and North Carolina. Those are, I would say, lean Democratic seats. Now you're also looking pretty good or tied or maybe slightly behind. So let's call them toss-up states in Montana, in Iowa, 2 Senate seats in Georgia. And I think those 4 seats are sort of in that middle tier. And then you have sort of these reach seats. These are if everything goes well and if Trump utterly collapses and Democratic turnout is what we hope it to be, then you're looking at potential pickups in places like Kansas and Texas. So there's a possibility. I think we're looking pretty good at having,
and maybe South Carolina.
Oh, how can I forget? South Carolina is that one of those.
Sorry, well, states. The reason you forget is because there's so many. There's so many possibilities.
I think I listed like 10 states, and only 2 of those were in blue states, Colorado and Maine. And we lost part of Maine because one of those electoral votes went to Donald Trump. So I think we're looking pretty good at 50-50 Senate, but 50-50 Senate would be better than being in the minority, but it would be problematic because it would empower sort of these conservative Democrats like Joe Manchin of West Virginia and Kristen Sinema of Arizona to create trouble, right? Just to be a swing vote and be pains in the butt. So we really want to get to about 53 to 55 seats. And this is where winning these tight seats and some of these reach states can really make a difference for things like Supreme Court expansion, eliminating the filibuster, statehood for DC and Puerto Rico. So I always see these people who are like, don't talk about Joe Biden winning because I don't want people to be apathetic or just tune out because they think we got this in the bag, right? This fear of complacency. And I think, like, why pretend that Joe Biden is losing and he's not? When we actually have seats that we're losing by a smidgen. If you really need to be motivated by that, then take a look at those Senate races in places like South Carolina and Kansas, because we haven't won elections to the extent that we can unless we maximize every opportunity. And there's even one more wrinkle, and that is if we win the special election in Arizona, and it's a much more difficult task because we have to get 50%. But if we can do it in Georgia, those Democrats would be seated immediately. And if we can delay the Supreme Court into the filling the seat till the lame duck, those two seats would be enough for us to block it. And so we're going to talk about the Supreme Court. I actually spent some time with Ilyse Hogue. She's the president of NARAL Pro-Choice America last week. I think I talked to her before COVID. And we had so much to talk about that. Oh, the debate, Kerry, that's what I forgot to talk about. The debate was that was in that sort of the week and a half of crazy that we've had. But we talked about the Supreme Court, because obviously NARAL is their primary mission is to protect the woman's right to choose reproductive rights. And so the Supreme Court looms massive in that. So the full interview is at the Daily Kos YouTube channel, which I hope you are following, that you are subscribing to it. The first, we're going to pull in some clips, and one of the questions that I had for her is this battle worth fighting right now? Can we actually defeat this, or are we just tilting at windmills and fighting a losing battle? So let's go to that first clip. Can we win this battle in the Senate today?
So, one of the strategies they employ is coming out as a unified front and saying we have the votes, because their subtext to that is don't even bother, because they know if we disengage that they have a clear runway and a clear pathway. I see the first two prongs that you laid out, and I think that's a perfect structure for the fight, to be completely intertwined, right? We have to drive up the political price of ramming through this confirmation. The people do not want it. The vast majority of Americans believe they should pick the president, and the president should pick the nominee. And by doing so, making some of those senators who came out quick, think about what that means for them in 2020 and 2022, by the way. And let's be clear, by the schedule they put out, they would be taking this vote days before the election, after people have already started to vote. So any glitch in their plan, any one of their senators peeling away, kicks this into lame duck session, and we can win the election and have more control. So we have to fight like it's winnable and drive up the political price in the process.
So, Kerry, one of the things that's funny, she talks about anything that happens that could delay the schedule.
Anything else!
And that was, I think we recorded that on
rampant through the halls of Congress.
Thursday, one day later. One day later. And we have a possibility that Republicans may have trouble getting the numbers that they need. The margins are very tight, right? We already have two defections on the Republican side. We have Susan Collins in Maine and Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, who may very well switch parties after the election, given where she is and how much Republicans in Alaska hate her. Whole different story. But it's funny, right? I mean, she's right. The margins are so tight that there's so many ways to derail this, and we're seeing this happen in real time.
Right. Well, there's so many ways to derail it. And, I actually feel like at the moment, the Mitch McConnell, in terms of trying to push this through, I'm not saying it couldn't happen, but man, are they living on borrowed time right now, because, you know, you've got these 3 senators who have come out COVID positive. Mike Lee of Utah, GOP senators, Mike Lee of Utah, Ron Johnson of Wisconsin, and Tom Tillis of North Carolina. And of course, Tillis and Lee are both on the Senate Judiciary Committee. Now, technically, you know, McConnell could put this on the floor without it even going through the Judiciary Committee. But at the moment, supposedly, Lindsey Graham has scheduled the first hearing on this within the Judiciary Committee on October 12th, Monday, October 12th. Well, you know, that doesn't even leave enough time for these guys to properly, Tillis and Lee, to really properly isolate. They're not just quarantining. It's not just the 14. I mean, they're supposed to be symptom free for a certain amount of time. This is just 10 or 11 days for each of them since they announced they were positive or they got a positive test back. So, you know, whether or not these guys, we haven't gotten any progress reports, right? There's this veil of secrecy happening on the Republican side. The White House isn't saying when Trump was last negative. It seems really clear at this point that they knew before he announced it that he was either symptomatic or potentially even positive before they announced it on that, you know, he announced it in that Friday 1 a.m. tweet, right? Yep. So, but also, you know, you've got Mitch McConnell, who won't say whether he, you know, what the status of his testing is, which seems really suspicious to me.
Weird. Very weird.
And then, right, and then you've got these 3 positive tests. You've got a couple of other people. Ben Sasse is one of them. He's on the Judiciary Committee. He's quarantining at the moment, right? Ben Sasse of Nebraska. And so, you know, you're really getting into troubled territory. We also don't have updates on Lee and Tillis and Ron Johnson, how they're doing. I know that Senator Johnson was recently did a radio interview and said, well, if it comes to it, I'll show up in a moon suit, you know, in order to like, you know, which he would. Ron Johnson would do that. The question is, are they going to be feeling well enough to do this? I mean, you know, Mike Lee's actually a relatively young guy. I don't know his exact age. Tillis, I think, is a little bit older. Ron Johnson, I think, is a little bit older too. They're not among the oldest, right? We're not talking 70 plus. But these guys, you know, who's to say how this is going to affect them? So I think they are Mitch McConnell is on a razor's edge right now in terms of having the time and the people. If they had to get a quorum of 50 people on a floor vote, right? They couldn't have, they're 53 in the Senate, right? And they couldn't have, they can only afford to lose potentially 2 of these people. I guess I'm pretty sure that the vice president can't count. If there's not a quorum, he can't make quorum. So he can't vote.
They need 51. Yeah.
They need 51. So if he loses 2 people, even if they make quorum, he loses 2 people who are potentially unable to vote, even if they make quorum, and then you lose Lisa Murkowski and Susan Collins on this. You're done, right? You haven't made it. You didn't make it. So you know,
it's important to note, as Ilyse said, that McConnell is claiming he has all the votes, he has everything. He did this with the Affordable Care Act vote, where he was looking to eliminate Obamacare. The entire time, McConnell claimed he had the votes. He wasn't worried. It was all good to go. It was all fait accompli. And then John McCain obviously did the famous thumbs down. So you never quite know till the very end. So I asked Ilyse specifically, are there pressure points that we can push on to try and defeat this on the floor of the Senate? So let's go to that clip.
Well, you know, I think the obvious ones, you know, the ones who are going to pay the most immediate price being Cory Gardner in Colorado, obviously, Martha McSally in Arizona. But Lindsey Graham, are you kidding me? I mean, Jamie Harrison is going to win that state, and Lindsey Graham can pay a terrible price. Now, is he going to flip? He might not. He's the chair of the Judiciary Committee, but they've got to feel the pain at home. And the other thing I will say is that this move of McConnell and Trump to ram this nomination through over the protests of the American people have put even more states in play, right? Mike Espy in Mississippi made more in the first 48 hours after RBG passed than Cindy Hyde-Smith, the incumbent in Mississippi, had made in all of Q2. Alaska is in play, right? It reminds me, speaking of our long history, of 2006 when the Americans had soured on the war and we just kept seeing the states in play expand and expand and expand. And I think some of those senators are going to get real cold feet when they see the momentum growing.
She's it's funny, she talked about Mississippi. We didn't even talk about Mississippi, which is another Senate race that suddenly is potentially in play. Mississippi.
You never know. I mean, really, yeah.
This battle is really starting to hurt these Republicans politically. And then the question is, what I still don't have a handle on is, have they surrendered yet? Do they, or are they still trying to fight to be reelected? Because if you're Cory Gardner, Martha McSally, we know that both of them voted on a key Obamacare vote that Chuck Schumer engineered last week. They voted with the Democrats. So there is a chance when you have these incredibly endangered Republicans, do they really want to cast a vote that will seal their fate? Or do they go to McConnell and say, wait till after the lame duck session, at least give us a chance to win? And the longer we push it off, again, the greater the chance that crazy happens, because this has been a whole year of crazy. And if it can happen, it probably will at this point.
I honestly think that's a good point that you brought up about those votes on the Affordable Care Act, right? To the Schumer bill, right? And that we got McSally, that GOP Senator McSally of Arizona and GOP Senator Gardner of Colorado to go with Democrats on that. That suggests that there still is some level of self-interest left within that caucus. And you know, neither one of those people, those senators, are particularly close in their race, but
it's almost too bad.
It's almost too bad, right?
Almost, but not quite.
But what I will say too is that I think that Mitch McConnell's calculations here are different than the calculations of the people who are in these vulnerable Senate seats. Mitch McConnell, I honestly believe, you know, these judges are his biggest legacy. Mitch McConnell's an abysmal lawmaker. He's not good at passing legislation, and he's even worse at writing it and making it. Every time they've tried to do something with their GOP majority, even when they were in sort of unified control of government, it was a disaster. There were, you know, notes written in the margins and, you know, last minute changes, and they didn't unveil anything even to the entire caucus until just before shoving it through. You know,
yeah,
so
the tax law is an example of that.
Right, and the failed effort to repeal the ACA. He's a terrible legislator. That's where Nancy Pelosi is so much better than him at legislating, right? But these judges are his final legacy. I mean, and I think one thing he does do is spend a lot of time studying the numbers. And I wouldn't be surprised at this point if he's concluded, I'm not gonna keep my caucus. And at that point, I think McConnell is an every, you know, person for themselves type of person. And his legacy is pushing through the judges and cementing a conservative supermajority on court, which, by the way, can be undone, right? We can fix that, right? That's the next clip,
and
I think.
That's a great a great segue into the next clip, because
let me just say this. Let me just finish this one thing, is that he may very well do everything in his power to push this vote through, even if it jeopardizes some of the people that are in his caucus, because this is his legacy. And I think he may look at the numbers and know that this is kind of his last gasp to try and cement that supermajority, you know, what I'm calling a supermajority. I don't think that's a real term for the Supreme Court. But anyway, go ahead.
It really is a sign of their weakness that we're pushing this now. If they thought they were going to win the Senate, they thought they were going to win the White House, there would be no reason to put those endangered Republicans at such risk. Instead, they're pushing through in a way that sort of betrays their panic at their coming political irrelevance. And the 2022 Senate map is incredibly friendly to the Democrats. It's all in Republican territory in states that are that are pretty good for us. So they see sort of the writing on the wall. Now, my math is what I don't understand is why aren't Democrats saying, if you push this through, we're going to expand the court. Now, you may, worst case scenario, you guys lose. You have a 5-4 conservative majority next year. But if you get 6-3 this year, we're just going to expand to 13 seats, and there's nothing constitutionally blocking Democrats from doing it. In fact, all it takes is a law. It's simple law to change the complexion of the Supreme Court. So I asked Ilyse, because Ilyse is actually, she's on the DNC party committee. She's a platform committee member. She obviously, as head of NARAL, she's constantly interacting with top Democrats and talking strategy. So I asked her, why aren't Democrats being more aggressive in threatening court expansion? So here's the last clip.
So let's be really clear. The GOP, we've talked about their 40-year strategy. Their 40-year strategy was to move what they knew to be an agenda that did not enjoy popular opinion. Absolutely true on abortion rights, true on lots of these other things too. So what do? 3 things. They capture the courts, which has been going on for quite a long time. No question, ramming through this nomination is endgame for them. They suppress the vote, which I'm sure you'll have other guests who know more about that than me. And they spread disinformation. We actively take a role in all of those conversations. And we think that accepting the idea that we could win the election, but live with a balanced court for the next 30 or 40 years is not a solution to anything we work for. I'm proud as a Democratic Platform Party Committee member to have filed the language on court reform, the first time it's ever been in the Democratic Party platform. And we absolutely have a conversation about what, as Leader Schumer says, is everything in our toolbox. As for Democrats, I don't know if you saw Ezra Klein's piece this morning in Vox, but I was taken by the fact that Biden actually didn't reject the idea of court reform in the shit show of a debate, as Dana Bash said last night, and left that door open, just as it's in the platform. It is a long overdue conversation, and we are absolutely committed to doing member and voter education about what that means, so that we can stiffen the spine of Democrats who do seem a little timid sometimes, not all of them, right? Some of them are out there on it, but need to get more unified in the fact that anything other than a real robust conversation about what that looks like lends us to a GOP agenda for decades, regardless of outcomes of elections. And that is not democratic.
So it's interesting. She points out that in that debate, that shit show of a debate, Biden really didn't come out against him. And I always think that Biden may be the biggest impediment to really deep systemic reform of our democracy, just because Biden is who he is. He wants bipartisanship. He wants to work with Republicans. He wants those things. That was a gimme. He could have easily said, no, we're not gonna mess with the court, and he didn't. She has a really strong point there. Even Democrats aren't explicitly coming out in threatening Republicans.
Yeah, I think 2 things stick out to me here, and one of them is that Biden worked really hard to get the Affordable Care Act passed. He's really proud of that. That's not just an Obama legacy to him. That's an Obama-Biden legacy to him. Not to mention that it's done millions and millions of people lots of good. 20 million people who didn't have health care insurance before, and over 100 million people who now are able to get health insurance for their be insured for their pre-existing conditions, right? So I think the thing that pushes Biden on something like that, where into territory that I feel like isn't particularly comfortable for him, and isn't something he's not the most aggressive when it comes to we need to push left, right? But I think when you start to look at a Supreme Court that's going to dismantle your legacy, you might really start to think twice about it, right? That's one thing. So but we all know that these oral arguments are coming up the week after the election on this Republican push to once again, another push through the courts to try to dismantle the Affordable Care Act. On top of that, one thing I think Biden is in tune with is trying to bring a majority of the American people along and trying to unify the country. And you simply cannot, as a matter of democratic government, have an entity like the Supreme Court be so extraordinarily out of step with public opinion of Americans as to be illegitimate, as to be viewed as illegitimate when they make big rulings on things, right? And I think this is a concept that Joe Biden is very much in touch with. And so, as Democrats, if universe willing, right, Democrats take the White House and take back the Senate and start to look at how to try to
big margins.
Right. Try to unify the country and also restore some legitimacy to these institutions like the CDC, like the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, and the FDA, and the military, and you can go and the Justice Department and the Supreme Court, right? I mean, every American's faith in every one of these governmental institutions needs to be restored. And part of restoring that, a very big part of restoring that, is to make sure that the Supreme Court isn't insanely out of step with a two-thirds majority of the public. So I think that's a place where Democrats can make a very good argument and actually push Joe Biden, and Joe Biden would be able to see the benefits of restoring faith in a obviously what's an incredibly important institution in American public life.
So love all that. We're out of time, but I'm going to leave you with a couple of things. The election is, as we tape, about 4 weeks away. In fact, exactly 4 weeks away.
Frightening.
Do what you need to do to help win this election. There's so many different ways. You can go to dailycoast.com/GOTV to find different ways you can be involved. GOTV, that's for Get Out the Vote. We talked to Ilyse Hogue. She's from NARAL Pro-Choice America. NARAL is doing a lot of activism to help win in key critical races around the country. So go to prochoiceamerica.org and you can join that organization and join in their actions. And one of the biggest things you can do, if not the biggest thing you can do right now, is you can vote early. And here's why it's so important. There are lists that party officials have lists of who has voted. If your name is on that list, they will try to contact you, phone calls, knocking on doors. Now, if you're watching this show, you're probably already gonna vote, right? So that is a waste of those resources. Get your name off those lists as quickly as you can so our party and campaign Get Out the Vote efforts can target people who legitimately are sort of toss-ups whether they will vote or not. So please get your name off those lists. Vote the second you can. I am Markos Moulitsas. I'm here with Kerry Eleveld from Daily Kos. This is Daily Kos' The Brief. Thank you so much for joining us. Subscribe to the Daily Kos channel. Check it out. We have full interviews with all our guests on that channel. And we will see you next week. Don't leave anything on the road. Let's win big for democracy. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.